We're talking things that make you blush, but trust us, it's a must. From awkward to taboo, we're here to guide you through. It don't matter if you're a bit of a prude, it's a prude awakening.
Hey, I'm Jessica, a self-proclaimed prude, and I'm out to prove that I'm not the only one.
And I'm Carmen. At Prude Awakening, we expose the truth about commonly known misinformation through investigation and awesome interviews with experts who know best. We ask the questions that most people are afraid to ask, like, ladies, do you know where your G spot is?
Oh, well, don't judge me by my uncomfortable laughter. We have an excellent episode today, and we are really excited to share. And of course, I asked some kind of crazy questions, but I think that I'm not the only one asking or wondering these questions. As our upcoming election is happening soon, I think a lot of people are not fully understanding or not really knowing what to do this election season. Who do I vote for? I don't really agree with one person or the other. So how do I vote? We had a really great interview.
We did have a good interview. And we, not all of the questions are about your G spot, But I think sometimes people are embarrassed that they don't know, become a certain age. You probably should know about what your civic duty is, when it comes to voting. But
Yeah.
a lot of people don't know. A lot
No.
of people don't realize, what their civic responsibilities are. But our interview with Desmond Price was amazing. And I don't want to say shocked that he was from Montana, because when I picture Montana, I picture like a red state with a lot of cowboys and stuff. And Desmond was just a really decent man who had a lot of insight into politics.
So Desmond, he is actually the host of Independent Thought, and you can follow him on Insta at Independent Thought. Our podcast, he goes into good description of how you can follow him and how you can listen on. And the interesting thing, though, is we actually taped this interview early on before Biden stepped out of the race. So I just wanted to make sure people understood, but we still felt like it had a really good content going forward because it wasn't just about Biden. It was
No.
about people and, the importance of voting, looking at each candidate, whether regardless of who is a candidate. So I think it still really resonates to a lot of people. It certainly resonated to me, where I am probably that common person that feels like I'm not sure what to do this year. And you want it to count, you want to decide, does my vote count or not? A lot of people are hesitant to know if that really matters. We do talk about that. So I want to just make sure, even though we bring up Biden here, it is still very relevant information. And I'm really, really excited to share this episode and this interview. We can't wait to have Desmond back on in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think next time we'll talk about something a little bit lighter, like life.
Hey everyone, welcome to A Prude Awakening. I'm Jessica, the self-proclaimed prude, and I have my co-host here, Carmen, and I guess she also agrees that I am a prude. We are here, though, to prove that I'm not the only prude out there. And with this upcoming election, we thought a perfect topic this episode would be to talk about the election and the voting system, because you know what? I fully don't understand it. And we have an amazing guest on today, Desmond. And I want to go ahead and first get him to introduce himself and his podcast.
Yes. So my name is Desmond Price. I host a political podcast called Independent Thought. For the most part, it's just a podcast about political commentary. So we kind of look at the news for the most part. Sometimes topics that kind of become adjacent that branch off from the news. But we've been going on for about 4 years now, and a lot of interviews, a lot of like solo episodes, a lot of some case studies. But mostly what we try to just do is take a look at some news stories that aren't really being covered by the mainstream media, or maybe from a certain angle that the mainstream media isn't covering.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here today. And do you have any social handles that people can follow you?
Yeah, I think the big one would just be, on Instagram at Independent Thought. I am on some other platforms, but not really super active, not worth following, if I'm being honest with you.
Awesome. Well, please look him up and give him a like or follow him on your social media, Instagram, Twitter. But he said Instagram is the best way to find him. Today, we're going to talk about, again, the voting system and also the upcoming election. And to be honest, Desmond, I think I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one here that would say this, but I feel like it needs to be said that I really truly don't understand, what's going on with this election and the current political landscape. I
Yeah.
want to understand. I want to be able to understand the upcoming presidential election. But for me right now, I'm having these issues of like, hey, I've got a president right now that I'm not fully liking. And I have a potential president that's on the rise that was a previous president, Donald Trump, that I really don't want there either. So I'm not sure what to do. And I'm sure I'm not the only one asking that question. I think that is a question in everybody's mind right now because we don't have a good candidate. And how do we even vote this election? Right.
It's a question that a lot of people have been asking themselves. And, there's no simple answer to the question, really. It's kind of just it's an individual thing. I mean, when you look back at the previous election, we just had this exact same matchup. So we had Joe Biden versus Donald Trump. We've both now had a presidency of Donald Trump and a presidency of Joe Biden. And so you don't really have to wonder what the country would be like under both people because we've seen what the country would be like under both people. They didn't have the exact same circumstances, obviously. I mean, one came off of a pandemic, the other one didn't. But even with that being said, you don't really have to wonder what governance would look like underneath them. So it's hard to know exactly what to do because, as you said, most people didn't want this matchup. They were showing poll after poll after poll, like leading up to this, last year, earlier this year, over 70% of America didn't want this rematch of Donald Trump versus Joe Biden again. Both people, like most people in both parties, wanted different nominees for the Republican ticket and for the Democratic ticket. And yet we're still stuck with these two anyway. And so it's kind of hard to know what to vote for. It feels like most people are kind of in the same place they were last time, where they're not really so much voting for someone, but voting against someone else. And so you have folks on the right who are voting against Biden because they don't like how the country is being run currently. You have folks on the left who are voting against Donald Trump because they think that he's an existential threat to the world. So, and I think you're not going to find a whole lot of difference this time around as far as that's concerned. I mean, people who like Donald Trump haven't really changed their opinion about that, from like 2016. Typically if they were with him then, they were with him in 2020, they're with him in 2024. And for those who are voting against him, also known as voting for Joe Biden, they were probably in that place in 2016. They were probably in that place in 2020, and they're probably in that place again in 2024. This election to me is going to come down to enthusiasm. Like who's able to turn out their base.
Right.
And have all of the criminal trials and all of those things. Is that going to actually, impact folks to come out in a different way? Or is the economy going to affect people to come out in a certain way? Is Roe v. Wade going to impact people to come out and vote in a way that they didn't before?
Right.
Or is what's happening over in Gaza right now going to impact whether or not people are going to come out and vote? So these are the questions that I think everyone who's in the political space is trying to decipher is who's going to turn out? Because that's really how this election is going to be determined, because everyone already knows how they feel about Biden and Trump.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
You don't think the people who voted for Trump previously, you don't think there's even a small percentage of those folks who are now in a position where they're like, wow, we really don't want to vote for him, and perhaps are just not going to vote, which I've heard from many people who voted for Trump and ask me why I know many people who voted for Trump. And I'll tell you, I have no fucking idea. Because, like, seriously. But, so, there are a group of them that, at least a small percentage who, with all of the things that have come out since that, since he was in office, and the things that we witnessed while he was in office that turned a very small percentage of people enough to say, listen, we're not going to vote for Trump, but we're not going to vote for Biden either. And it's so they don't vote, and that is not democracy. If people aren't voting, and they have a right to not vote, but it's really not true democracy if they're not casting a vote, casting a ballot for something they believe in. And it is hard that there's nothing to believe in. But do we just break it down into good versus evil? I mean,
yeah. What is that though? Which one is the evil? Like, I know who you think it is, right? But in my opinion, on both ends, I'm not liking either of it, and so what other option do I have? Like the Green Party, right? Or writing in a candidate, or what is it? I've written in candidates before because there's nothing I could get behind, but there's this perception of, if you don't vote, this is like the common perception. If you don't vote, then this other candidate might win, right? And previously when Hillary and Trump and that were going at it or whatever, that was a perception. If you don't vote for Hillary, then Trump's going to win, or the vice versa, or whatever it was. But is that true?
I mean, there's no arguing that it is true in our two-party system, which is a whole different conversation, because I think the two-party system is actually a huge detriment to our current ability to actually have democracy in a deeper conversation. But talking about people who don't vote, in the last election, Biden got 81 million people to vote for him. Trump got 75 million people to vote for him. The largest block of voters in America weren't Biden voters or Trump voters. They were actually people who didn't vote. Over 100 million people didn't vote. Yeah. And that was like one of the largest turnouts that we've had in almost 100 years. And we still had over 100 million people not vote. More people are not going to vote in this election than in 2020. I bet my life savings on it right now. So will people be checking out this election? I guarantee it. I see it all the time. As somebody who has the account that I do on Instagram, who I can talk to people all the time, I get DMs from people on a daily basis talking about how disgusted they are with this situation. There is no doubt in my mind that a lot of people are just not going to vote, or they're going to vote third party. That is also going to be happening. So the real question then becomes is, because this isn't just as a phenomenon for Biden either, this is happening with Trump as well. A lot of his voters are upset with him. But the real question is, who's going to be impacted by this more? Or more of previous Biden voters going to sit it out than previous Trump voters? And there's also the wild card that we didn't have last time, which is a third party candidate who is going to take a significant portion of the votes in all of these swing states, which is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So the impact that he's going to have on this election is also really profound. It's going to be way more profound than it was in 2020 and definitely in 2016. And the media has been having a hard time figuring out, is Kennedy taking more votes from Trump, or is he taking more votes from Biden? Because depending on the poll you take, it gives you different answers. So we're all kind of in a place right now where we think it might be even. So who knows what that's going to lead to?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be hilarious if Ralph Nader accidentally won because so many people wrote in Ralph Nader?
Is he around still? I guess
he's alive, but he's really old. I mean, he's older than Biden.
Age.
No, he's older than Biden. And for the record, Biden is only a few years older than Trump.
No, they're both too old.
They're both too old.
Both
I know.
Too old.
I agree. So, this is like, when I was a kid, and they don't teach this anymore.
Yeah.
But we're supposed to have an elected government that was elected by the people to serve the people, by the people, for the people. And that really has never happened in my lifetime. The closest I think we've ever come is for me, maybe not Jessica, but was Bill Clinton. Okay. That was like the closest in my lifetime that we've come to, by the people, for the people. he was a person that I could like see, I could imagine having a meal with. I can kind of see that with Joe Biden, but I'd probably have to wipe gravy off his chin, and but I could never imagine that with Donald Trump. And like this is a problem with voting. Like there's so many people who are just disgusted with our options, and we do not have a representative that represents us. And when did we ever have a real representative that was not a rich fat white guy that
Right.
Well, I mean, I would say to your first point there, where you said that about like having a government that represents the people,
Mhm.
I would say that's not entirely true. I think you have to just be a little bit more accurate in like who are you defining as the people? Because I think
Right.
there's certain people in this country who every president works on their behalf. If
Mhm.
you're in a certain tax bracket,
that's
I think
right.
if you're
Yeah.
really rich, then every president represents you.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I think though, yeah, those people are doing really well in this. I mean, the economic conditions in this country are benefiting the richest people in this country very well.
Absolutely.
Their wealth
Mhm.
increases year over year. This is the American dream for them.
Mhm.
So, but yes, there's a lot of disillusionment when it comes to this election. I feel it myself. Like
Yeah.
there is no part of me that I voted for Biden in 2020, full transparency.
Mhm.
I will not be voting for him in 2024. I will not be. And I feel like whenever I talk to somebody on the left about this, they get really upset. But I think that there's a lot of caveats to how we vote in this country, particularly with the Electoral College, for instance. And it's something I've been trying to like have more conversations with people. I
Mhm.
live in a deep red state. I
Right.
live in the state of Montana.
Mhm.
I can vote for Joe Biden all day long. He's never going to win Montana. He's never going to do it. Me voting for him in this state is just as symbolic as me voting for a third party candidate. So in that scenario, if you live in Montana or in Kentucky or in Arkansas, North Dakota, Tennessee, just plug in the red state and you're a left-leaning voter, there's no reason not to vote for a third party candidate if that's what you want to do, because it's going to have the exact same effect on the outcome that voting for Joe Biden would in those
Right.
states.
Mhm.
So I'm just kind of done, I guess, voting symbolically for the Democrats when it comes to the presidential line. Now, but to go further with your question, though, about like, where's the value in voting in this election? I think it's further down the ballot in the state
Mhm.
elections, in
Exactly.
the state
Right.
legislature, in the local elections. These policies actually do affect our everyday lives. And we see the results of it time and time again versus the federal elections. There's so much gridlock in Washington that it feels like it almost doesn't matter who the president is or who's in control of Congress because they never get anything done anyway. But
Yeah.
meanwhile, at the state level, things are getting done constantly. And so
Right.
these elections have a huge like impact on our lives. The
Right.
governor's race, state legislature, who's your district attorney, who's the local sheriff, maybe. I mean, these are
Mhm.
tremendously impactful elections. I think that for those who are thinking about sitting out, I would hope that if you don't want to vote at the top of the ticket for Biden or Trump, then leave it blank, but go below that and
Mhm.
vote for your state house race, your state senate race, like who's your local mayor, who's your local city council people. Like these are the folks that truly have an impact on your life. And a lot of these races, like they come down to the wire. So, I mean, like not voting in them really can have an impact on your life.
Yeah, I'm actually really glad you said that because I think that's one of the misconceptions that I tell people is that,
Yeah.
hey, because I don't feel comfortable voting for that, like you said, the top of the ticket. I don't know if it even matters, that's kind of like the perception of like, hey, does my vote matter? But I always tell people I do believe in voting for the rest of the state or my county or whoever is there, the school board at time, you know what I mean? All
Yeah.
these votes, they do matter. I get the looks though. I get the looks like, oh, you didn't vote for the president, then your vote doesn't count. Like your vote doesn't matter. You can't have an opinion because you didn't vote. You didn't spread, I
I
did
said
vote.
that one time.
Carmen. No, it was not
One-
Carmen. But I just I think a lot of people get the look, they don't like to talk about it, but you're right, everything else, the things that are happening around you really it really matters. It
Yeah.
does affect you. They do come down to a really close race, so I definitely agree with that. But I'm glad you said it because I think a lot of people probably don't talk about it, but they do vote for those small portions. So, don't leave it blank.
Right. And I think the last thing I would want to mention there before we kind of transition to the next topic is that
Mhm.
if I lived in a swing state, I don't know that I'd feel the same way that I do. I
Right.
think I have the privilege of feeling this way because I live in a state that's essentially predetermined for me in this stupid system that we have. In the
Yeah.
Electoral College, you have 35 states out of the 50 who are predetermined today. Like I could accurately mark them in the map, deposit all of the money that I have in my bank account as a wager, and I would feel comfortable knowing that I would be correct come election day, that those states will fall the way that I said they would.
Right.
There's really
Exactly.
only 15 states in every election that are even considered to be swing states, and of those 15, 7 of them are truly up for grabs. You know, so I mean, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina. If you're in one of those 7 states, then your vote actually matters this election. Everyone else, it's kind of debatable.
Yeah. I mean, and we're in Arizona, Carmen, so
We
we're
are
gonna
in
have
Arizona.
to figure it out.
Well, I've already got my vote figured out.
Oh, I know,
So
I know.
you're in one of the 7. So yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
well, it's
I
a
have
lot.
to
I think it's a
vote.
lot more. Yeah,
I have
it's
to
definitely
vote
a
my
different
conscience.
calculus there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
and
Exactly.
I do have to vote. This is something that when I was a little kid, we looked forward to. We were taught this in school from the time we were like in kindergarten. When you turn 18, you get to vote, the privilege to vote. And it was
Right.
something we looked forward to. And I do realize Arizona is a swing state. We really need to get out there. But I want to touch back on, the red states. Do you think there's going to be any movement in those red states because of some of the issues that are on the ballot this year? Roe v. Wade. Do you think because even though we have, these very red states, there's
Yeah.
still a lot of young men and women in those states that might take severe umbrage to that topic alone. Or
Right.
so do you
I
think
think
there's going to be any movement with some of the policies or some of these things that have occurred since the last election?
this is where you get into the weeds.
Right.
Right. This is where you get into the weeds. I'm going to try to make this, I guess, as simplistic as I know how to make it. The first thing I'll say is that 2020, I'll just take from direct experience here rather than trying to talk about all the red states. In Montana, we had the largest turnout in our history, and Biden lost by 17 points. 17 points. It was a blowout.
Okay.
And that was the largest turnout in our history. And we've always been told that large turnouts lead to like better margins for Democrats. It was the exact same turnout that Hillary got, basically. So it wasn't that much of a difference, all things being said. And strangely enough, though, I think some people get a little confused by it because when you look at certain red states, for instance, you'll see like Kentucky and you'll say that, well, Kentucky has a Democratic governor. Or if you go back to my state of Montana, Montana has a Democratic senator. And so these are statewide races where Democrats won in red states. So why is that? And to be honest with you, it's hard to really know. But for some reason, we've seen across the country time and time again that there are some times where you can have these like split ticket phenomenons, like lower on the ballot, where like, whether it's like the Senate or you'll have a governor race, where a opposite party can win in what you would call a red or a blue state. Like, for instance, Massachusetts and Maryland have had Republican governors.
Right.
And so you see that and you're like, what the hell? Look, those are deep blue states. Biden won those by 30 points. And they also had a Republican as governor. So what's going on there? But you do see that split ticket phenomenon happening at these other seats, Senate, governor. But for the president, it seems pretty traditional in the sense that when we refer to something as being a red state, the Republicans, will carry that state on the presidential line. Same thing with Democrats, in these blue states carrying on the presidential line. So I don't see that changing when it comes to like this election. We talk about like Roe v. Wade, for instance. I don't see it moving red states. Now, what it might do, and what I actually am expecting it to do, I think it'll move some House districts.
Right.
I actually fully expect the Democrats to retake the House because of Roe v. Wade. I think the Republicans are going to be having some issues down there. I think you're going to
Yeah.
see certain points where Trump might, if you were like, look at these like ballots, you're going to see ballots where Trump was slotted in for the presidential line and a Democrat was slotted in a House seat or a Senate seat. And I think we're going to see a lot of that this election.
Yeah,
agree.
I agree. I agree too. I want to move into the next topic here. We talked about voter turnout, right?
Yeah.
And a little bit about that, but I want to expand on that. Do you think there are any efforts being made to like increase voter registration? You talked about the millions of people who did not vote.
Yeah.
That's registered voters or unregistered voters in your
Those are eligible voters. So people who
Eligible.
were eligible to vote who didn't vote.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's crazy to me that here we have these eligible voters that aren't voting, but we also have people who are not registered to vote too.
Mhm.
And we have these things that we can't, I don't know if there's a way to track. This is me saying like, hey, I have no idea. How do we even track who's not registered, right? We have the census and stuff comparatively, but who is not voting? Like, are there individuals? Is it because there are barriers or they don't understand the system? What exactly is happening here? Because I don't understand that.
Well, there's a couple different reasons for it. Like as far as who knows that, there's a Secretary of State position that's applied to all 50 states. So every single state has their own Secretary of State, and that Secretary of State is responsible for the voting in every single state. And they actually also have what is known as like voter rolls. So they know who every eligible voter is in the state and whether or not they're registered. And while who you vote for is private, it is public information if you vote in an election. And so the Secretary of State will also post that information as well. So depending on the state, and this is the part where I've always found it to be a little weird because I think there should be more uniform law across the country, but certain secretaries of states will go through the voter rolls and they'll purge them occasionally. Typically, you'll see this happen because they want to make sure that people who are dead, are no longer receiving a ballot.
Yeah.
But also, you'll see that if people move, that they're not still getting a ballot. Maybe they don't live in that state anymore. But then, sometimes we've been seeing recently this obsession with signature verification.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
Right,
I've had
to
that
which-
happen to me where I've got denied my ballot after the election was over. They told me
Right.
it didn't match.
To which I think that's absolutely ridiculous. I know personally, if you were to ask me to sign my name 10 times in a row right now, I don't know that they would all look the same. Actually, they wouldn't all look the same.
Mine
And
for
so-
sure. No.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So the fact that they're denying people's ballots over like signatures not matching up is just, I think it's a little ridiculous. But
Mhm.
with all that being said, I'm sorry. Could you? What was the other part of the
Mhm.
question? I do apologize.
No, what exactly is happening? Why are there not any, like, what are we
Oh,
doing
yes.
to increase the ballot
Right,
turnout
right.
or the registration?
I've always been a big proponent. I think we need to have just some form of like automatic like voter registration in this country. Like
Mhm.
I understand the feelings around people being worried that people who are voting who shouldn't be voting. Like I understand that fear around that. But I think in this digital age where we can do so many different things online, it shouldn't be too hard to actually create a system in place to where we can make sure that everyone who should be eligible to vote, is eligible to vote and can just show up and vote and not make them go through so many hoops. But it feels like, this is in my mind a form of like voter suppression to a degree, to
Absolutely.
make people have to show up every single time and re-register again and again and again.
Yep.
When the government, the Secretary of State in particular, they already know who's eligible to vote and where you
Right.
live and where you're supposed to vote. And if you have voted, like they already have all the information. They don't make it easier on people because they don't want as many people participating in the system. So to a degree, why is the number of people so high who don't vote? Well, to
Yeah.
a degree, it's by design.
Mhm.
And also, there's a lot of people who
Absolutely.
just check out because, let's be fair, this country is not really working for everyone.
Yeah.
And when you see a Democrat show up as president and the country doesn't get better, and then a Republican shows up and the country doesn't get better, and that just repeats and repeats and repeats over the course of your lifetime,
Mhm.
some people get frustrated and they're like, hey, I keep voting and nothing's getting better. In fact, it's getting worse. So
Right.
Yeah.
what's going on here?
Yeah, exactly.
Also,
Go ahead.
anytime you register to vote, you're also signing up for jury duty. And,
I think
it's
they
like,
find you.
"Ah." my civic duty or my free time. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do think a lot of people are disillusioned with the whole process. You know,
Yeah.
it shouldn't be a full-time job. It shouldn't even be a part-time job to be able to vote.
Yeah.
You know, making things more, bringing things down to a level that people understand without saying, "Oh my
Yeah.
God, you don't know that," is really important. But you know, getting people out, boots on the ground, I think might help voter turnout, or at least increase the registration numbers. You know, if people weren't disillusioned by our country,
Mhm.
because like, you know, there's so many people, and I think you're right, Desmond, is that it's just like, what's the point? And, you know, I would like to vote, but I'm probably going to be drunk that day. You know, we really need like the young people of our country to become very engaged
Yeah.
and start driving that change. And in order to do that, they're going to have to dethrone a lot of rich white guys, rich, fat white guys. And that's really what our government has been. Even if they're wearing dresses, they're still not representing us. And we need the young people who really can drive change to kind of see themselves in those seats.
Yeah,
To
there's a lot of barriers in the way, unfortunately. You know, there's a
Yeah.
lot of unfortunately there's the country at large is dominated by various people who have a lot of influence via the amount of wealth that they have, and
Right.
they're
absolutely.
able to insulate themselves from that change by putting
Mhm.
roadblocks in the way at so many different turns.
Absolutely.
You know,
Yes.
so I mean, there's it's not a secret that lobbyists kind of comb the halls of the House of
Mhm.
Representatives and the Senate, you know, and they're able to essentially through legalized bribery, getting rid of
Mhm.
Citizens United, they're
Mhm.
able to essentially buy votes and buy legislation legally. Like there's no
Yeah.
conspiracy about it. Like they hang out in the halls of the Capitol all day long. And so
Mhm.
it does become tricky as time goes on to figure out how we can kind of upset this current power structure when it's so well entrenched at this point.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and do we have you talked about the barriers, and so one of the things that I'm always hearing about barriers is that, people don't have access to be able to vote or
Yeah.
and it's true. I mean, it is true. We don't have, but you create these ways of access. Like you're talking about digitally, that would be amazing if we could come up with something like that. For me, I think because it's an ease to be able to do that. But for other individuals, like how do we create the or overcome those barriers or those challenges to be able to have it be more accessible? And then on top of that, it's not just about how we vote. It's also about, underrepresented people like being oppressed and not being able to vote. And I want to talk about that because I think that I don't truly understand the process. I understand why it might be, but the system is so screwed up in the way that one thing affects the next. And if, people who can't get to the polls
Yeah.
were able to mail in, but they don't want to mail in. They have to go to the polls, but they're working. It's just like this crazy systematic problem that we have. Can you talk more about that and help me understand a little bit more about what's going on there? It's a big
This is
question.
actually no, I think it's this is the part where I was kind of like alluding to previously about the fact that
Yeah.
like every single state really has their own kind of voting mechanisms.
Right.
Now, it'd be great to see there be more uniformity because, for the most part, when we hear about voter suppression or just like making it impossible to vote, we typically think of like red states, for instance. And
Mhm.
I actually want to tip the cap a little bit to the state that I live in because I think our red state, I think we have an incredible voting system here. I mean, we have same day registration here.
Mm.
We have like 3 weeks of early voting, and this is stuff that goes on like 7 days a week. There's like polling locations open all over like every community in the city that I live in, so you can drive up any day, like 12 hours a day. Like so like if you work in the mornings, there's polling places open. If you work in the afternoons, just polling places open. Like whatever the case may be, and this is going on for 3 weeks prior to the
Yeah.
election. On top
That's
of that,
awesome.
they mail out ballots to every eligible voter in the
Yeah.
community with postage already paid for by the county. And so when you think about it, that is making it as easy as humanly possible. At that point, if
Yep.
you don't vote, you just didn't want to. Let's just be
Right,
100%
right.
honest. You have
Sure.
3 weeks. You could have dropped it off anywhere. It was even mailed to you. You could mail it right back. I mean, obviously, if it got to you, you know where to put it back at. Just put it right back in the mailbox. So, I mean, it really makes it as foolproof as possible at that point, as far as like accessibility is concerned. You
Mhm.
know, so I would love to see policies like that. And again, and this is why I hated so much, you know, last time around when Trump and other Republicans were attacking like mail-in voting, for instance.
Yeah,
We
right.
had an all mail-in election here in Montana, and the Republicans swept everything. They swept everything.
Yes.
And so to hear them like get on the horn and then complain about like mail-in voting afterwards, it was just like I couldn't get over how much that
Yeah.
annoyed me. You know, so anyway, my point is that mail-in voting is definitely the way that we should be going about these
Yeah.
things. It just makes it easier for everyone. Having early voting being a thing, because elections shouldn't be conducted on one day. It's too much
No.
stress on the polling like places. It's too much stress on the workers who have to process these ballots. And it would also eliminate the problems that we had in the last election, where we were spending days and days and days trying to figure it out. You know, credit to a state that I normally wouldn't credit, being Florida. They actually allowed their workers down there to start processing their mail-in ballots as soon as they received the ballots.
Oh, that's
Versus
good.
Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan,
Yeah.
they
Mhm.
actually made those states wait until election day to
Right.
process their ballots. And that's why there were such delays in those states.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, while Florida was able to finish their counting for the 3rd biggest state in the country on election day. So, you know, election laws, you know, really do matter when it comes to these things. And it would be better for all of us, I think, if there was some uniformity to it.
Yeah.
We should be
I
allowing
agree.
early voting everywhere, mail-in ballots everywhere. That's going to go a long way.
Yeah, and
I
I can also say that like I've done both obviously, and I do mail in right now, and I like to be able to not feel pressured. Like I don't have anybody waiting behind me to come in and vote.
Right.
I don't have to feel like I know what's on this ballot when I don't,
Yeah.
because a lot of times it is this writing that's like, what the heck is this policy? I got to read it again. You know, what exactly is it? Yes, that I would vote for this one, or is it no? Like it's worded so strangely that it feels like a trick question when I go to print yes or no on which policy I'm going to vote for, right? So
Yeah.
it's nice to be able, I think it gives people more information, more time to think about what they really want to do. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I think mail-in is the way. I've loved mail-in, minus the fact, like I said before, that my signature that one time that kind of ticked me
Yeah,
off,
that's
because I'm like, well, yeah,
unbelievable.
I didn't. I changed my signature, you know, but whatever. It is what it
Yeah.
is. But it
In
is
my
ridiculous.
entire life, I have never stood in line to vote.
Really,
Yeah, I've voted by mail in every single election.
that's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
understand like why you wouldn't if you had the opportunity to.
yeah. I know.
Just-
It made it so easy
Yeah.
when
It
it
is so
happens.
easy.
It's easy.
But
Yeah.
in Arizona, independents can't do the mail-in ballot. Is that correct? You have to.
Well, I believe so. This is, this is honestly something that I don't understand either, and we can address it now or not. But what we like, I'm an independent. That's what I consider myself as. I go off of who I'd want to vote for more. I don't have a party. I don't feel very drawn to a certain party. Like I mentioned, it's not like something that's what's more important to me at this time.
Yeah.
And in Arizona, at least, you have to be a part of a party to be able to get the
mail-in.
well, not the mail-in. I think you can still get the mail-in. I'm an independent. I get the mail-in.
Oh, okay.
But you can't vote for like state candidates or whatever. So for instance, like we can't vote for if we want, who we want in the Republican Party, because we're independent, unless we choose to either take a Republican ballot or a Democrat ballot. Does that make sense? I'm not sure if I'm speaking that right.
So is there an open primary in Arizona? Do you have access to each ballot and then you have to just pick one of them to
You
fill
have to
out?
pick one of them. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, so we have the same thing up here. And I have, I do like the fact that it's an open primary, because you have certain states that have closed primaries where you basically have to declare who you are ahead of time, and you only get that ballot sent to you, or, what presented to you when you go to the polling place.
Right.
I do prefer states that have open primaries. I think that's, better for democracy as far as I'm concerned. But yeah,
Mhm.
it would be nice if we could get to a point where if you, especially in the primaries, if you wanted to
Yeah.
vote for, an independent candidate in one race and then a Republican in another race, a Democrat in another
Right.
race, I think
Mhm.
that would actually be preferable if we could have something like that.
Yeah. Why can't we, I guess, why can't we be able to vote who we think the best Democratic candidate is and the Republican candidate, no matter what party you are? Like, that's for me. I'm just kind of thinking, like, why? Why can't I say, oh, I think this person is good for the Democrat? Not that I'm necessarily going to vote for him or whatever,
Right.
but, and I think this is the better party for the Republican candidate or the better person for that. Why can't I also vote for two different people? Why do I have to choose one?
I think depending on the state, they probably give you different answers for
Sure.
why they feel the way that they feel. But just purely speculation, I think to a degree, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, and this is not just individual for state, but from a national perspective,
Mhm.
they're trying to limit the ability of other people to influence their elections in the
Right.
sense where they want their voters voting for their people. And they don't want other people's voters, coming in and kind of like affecting their election and vice versa.
Mhm.
So I think that our voting system as a whole, which is kind of referred to as like first past the post, I don't know why
Mhm.
it's referred to that way, but
Mhm.
I think that it's archaic and that it
Mhm.
needs to be
Yes.
dismantled. I think we'd be better off doing something like ranked choice voting or something like to that effect, because
Yeah.
there's other voting methods besides ranked choice. Um, I think we'd be better off for it if we just had that across the board. And I think
Yeah.
our two-party system would be uh, depowered considerably if we
Yeah.
actually had that in place in all 50 states.
I agree
I agree.
completely. I have one last question, and Carmen, you can chime in too if you have another. Here's one question that I have, and this is a question that I always think about whenever I vote. Do you wear the sticker? Do you wear the sticker?
I
The
love
I
the
voted
sticker.
sticker?
I've never done it.
No.
No, I've never actually been to a polling place. So
Get up to your mail-in
They
ballots.
mail it into.
Yeah.
I don't know about Montana. Maybe that's not true,
yeah.
but
Go to
our mail-in
Arizona.
ballots.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know what?
I did have it once, but I didn't go out and wear it afterwards. But I did take a picture of who I was voting for and I
Oh,
posted it on social media because, well, I have a political account, so it's
yeah,
just something I do.
sure.
Yeah.
So you know what those stickers are really good for? If you have the mail-in ballot, we do this on our off time. You put that sticker on, you take an extra long lunch on voting day, and they can't say anything because they have to allow you time to vote.
Oh,
There you
I love
go.
it.
I
I
already
love
mailed
it.
in, but I'm gonna take that long
Take that
lunch.
sticker. And you know what? If you have extras, save them. We could do a group thing. But
Yeah.
yeah, those stickers, I like the stickers. The stickers
Yeah.
are,
Yeah.
we used to get stickers when we were, and it's sort of the same thing as like going to the dentist. You're doing something you don't want to do. Here's your reward, a
Yep.
sticker. Maybe they should make those scratch and sniff, and a lot more people would vote. Well, who doesn't love a scratch and sniff? I mean, at least it would get people to the polls.
I guess it
Not
depends
me.
on what it smells like.
Yeah, not
Yeah.
the pizza one. The
Yeah.
pizza one was gross, right?
I mean, I'm trying.
How about
I
if
can't
it
even imagine it.
how about if it just smelled like fresh, clean air? That
Yeah.
would get, that's also something people need to be, talking about
Yeah, that's true. It's
is
true.
our environment. But yeah, maybe scratch and sniffs. I should just run for office.
I think so, Carmen.
Yeah. I mean, the more normal people that we have in there, the better off we're going to be.
I agree.
Okay, I didn't say I was
agree.
normal. But no, I think, I think we do need people who have actually lived life in this
Mhm.
country. I would love to see somebody who is a single parent, but not a millionaire single parent, like
Mhm.
somebody who's actually worked two jobs
Mhm.
to make ends meet, somebody who really understands what Americans are dealing with on a daily.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no real easy way to do this,
No.
the more I go into it, but the problem really is kind of what we talked about before, which is like the legalized bribery.
Mhm.
Because when you have like a system that's in place that allows any lobbyist to walk into Capitol Hill and essentially say, my corporation will give X number of dollars into your campaign if you vote this way on this bill. While that continues to exist, I don't know that things are going to be able to get better. And also at the same time, where you have these same people, these senators and these Congress people who are able to buy and trade stocks that they're
Right.
directly able to vote on. So they're like, well, I could do this great thing for the country, but if I vote this way, then this company's stock will go up. And I just bought that stock. So,
Right.
like, I mean,
Right.
like that system is in place right now. When you see there's a great organization called Unusual Whales that tracks a lot of this stuff, and they post about it on Twitter /X and Instagram, and they'll show these charts of how many people in Congress, Democrats and Republicans, who are just buying stocks left, right, and sideways, like becoming millionaires like so quickly. I mean, it's unbelievable. I think Nancy Pelosi's already made a few $1 million so far this year. It's unbelievable to me. And so I don't know how we can move forward while that system's still intact.
Yeah.
I agree. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, I have one last thing. Anything
Sure.
that you would tell someone like me, someone who doesn't always understand the general public, is there any one thing that you would say about this upcoming election that you want to say to them, and have it be something that, feels like it feels important to you? What would it be?
I'll try to, I'm actually going to cheat here and do two things.
No,
The first thing would be, don't sit out the election. Like, again, if you can't stomach voting for Biden or Trump, at least vote in your local elections, your state elections, local city council stuff, state legislature, governor. These things are so important. Like, it feels like we get dominated as far as like headline coverage is concerned about what happens in Washington, D.C. But when you actually look at the totality of their effectiveness, I mean, there are very few things that actually make it to the president's desk and get signed. And that because of the way the Senate is structured, because you have to pass things through the House and the Senate before the president signs it, and so you have to get bipartisan support in the Senate for anything to get done. And these two parties hate each other. They'd rather see each other fail than actually do anything to help us wholly, which leads inevitably to not a lot of things getting done. And so it feels like when we look at their effectiveness over the course of any presidential term, not a lot of things to report, really. But at the end, when you look at your own state, there's things happening constantly. Constantly, you are seeing things coming out of your state legislature being signed by your governor. So it deserves your attention. I would think that if you want to put your energy somewhere, keep it in your own state, because it'll be more effective to you that way. But I think I want to specifically talk to Biden voters for a second, because I think a lot of them have become disillusioned because of what's been happening in Gaza. And I don't blame them if they don't want to sit out this election, if they don't want to vote for him for some reason. I totally understand it. A lot of people have said that to me. But I think to a degree, if you're in one of those swing states, it might be just useful to not, I guess, sit this one out, because while I actually don't subscribe to the belief that, like, a lot of people feel that Trump is going to like get back into office and then he's going to like unleash the apocalypse. I really don't believe that's going to happen. I really don't. I'm not a fan of Donald Trump in any way, shape, or form. I think he's the consummate narcissist. But I also think that he's a lot more ineffective as a leader than people like want to perceive him out to be. Like, I've heard so many conspiracies about Project 2025 and like what he's going to unleash onto the country if he gets back into office. But I think that there's so many checks in the way in this country between federal judges, between, again, the Senate. He's not going to be able to get anything through the Senate because the Democrats are going to have at least 40 senators no matter what. And they're probably going to retake the House. So from a legislative standpoint, Trump getting reelected, I don't think is going to have this like doomsday scenario everyone keeps playing out for themselves. But I also don't know that the change that people want to see happen in this country, who are left-leaning voters, are going to be possible if Biden's not the president. I mean,
Mhm.
that maybe not everything's being done while he is in office, but nothing will be done if he's not in office.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. Thank
So-
you. Susan. I appreciate you being on the podcast, and
Absolutely.
I've certainly learned tons of information just talking with you, and I hope that in the future we can have you back on again.
Of course.
We'll have your information up for everybody to see so they can like and follow you and your pod. And again, just appreciate. I know I'm not the only one who had questions answered today.
For sure.
And I again appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
Thank
Thanks for having
you.
me on.
Things that make
Yeah,
you
thank you.
blush, but trust us, it's a must. From awkward to taboo, we're here to guide you through. It don't matter if you're a bit of a prude, it's a prude awakening.